Back here, it is coming up on 9/10. We're still at 9:09, technically on a Monday edition, November 5th. It's our first Monday of the month, so that means it's Mondays with the Mayor. Mayor Andrea Summerville is in studio. How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm waiting for tomorrow to be over.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I think you'll find a few people in town that share that same sentiment.
I'm looking forward to what happens, the results. I really am, actually, because there's a lot of big, important races, and we're gonna kind of divide up your interview here into two parts. We'll talk about what's going on right now that people need to be aware of with city government and city council, and then we'll take a little brief pause and then come back and we'll talk a little bit about your candidacy here for re-election in 2018. But let's start about, first of all, number one, I know one big thing that's on the agenda and one thing that you and I have talked about, the 6 penny tax passed earlier this year. Now we've been talking the last couple months about the 5th penny tax renewal that is big for vital services. We're talking fire, police, things like that here in the community.
It is, yeah. So that'll be up for renewal on the November ballot. And I want to talk just real briefly about the ballot language that's on there, because you're not going to see anything on your ballot that says, do you approve renewal of the 5th penny? That ballot language says something to the effect, do we allow the Albany County Commission to impose a 1% sales tax within the county? And that's the 5th penny. It's not as clear as you know we would kind of hope on the ballot, but we have some statutory requirements on the language that has to be used. But I want people to know that, because I don't want anybody to get confused. And then right below that, you'll have the renewal of the lodging tax as well. And on that 5th penny, for the city portion of that, we use it for paying our police officers, firefighters. We use it from our streets department, things that aren't connected to our enterprise fund, so not water, not sewer, that kind of stuff. So it is critical to the operations right now of the city of Laramie government.
Another big part of the conversation has been coming off the 6 penny tax. You and I talked last month about the forums that were that took place last month in the month of October about the conversation that you guys wanted to start about, now that the 6 penny had passed back in August, what residents exactly wanted in terms of streets. How would you characterize how the 3 different forums went that were open to the public? How was attendance? Let's start there. How was attendance?
Attendance at the 2 forums that were held in West Laramie out at Linford School was good. We had more than 30 people each night that was there. So that was wonderful. The one at City Hall, I think we only had a couple of people that came over to City Hall.
Okay.
Maybe Linford is a more appealing venue than City Hall. Who knows? But the conversation was good. We got to talk about what types of streets, kind of the different options, the different costs. One of the things that I think that was a little confusing for people was we provided some financial information as if we were to do it right now, just so people knew what it would cost per linear mile and things along those lines. There was a little bit of misunderstanding in that I think some of the residents thought that the city of Laramie was asking them to pay for all of that on the unpaved streets, and that's certainly not the case. That was just for an information. This is the cost of it right now. The council hasn't made any decisions on cost share, or frankly, they haven't made the decision on a policy overall what to do with unpaved streets yet.
Well, and part of that you and I have talked about is waiting till this new council comes in January, because we could have some change tomorrow.
We could, absolutely. There are 5 seats that are up on the city council, and so it's very important. We did have good attendance from all of the candidates that are running at these meetings, so that's great. So they've got some background information. They've heard the comments from the public as well, but it really needs to be a decision, I think, that the new council makes.
All right. So, and that was something that you and I talked about last month. You wanted to start the conversation, but no final decisions will be made until after this new council. Because frankly, that would be a little bit unfair to them, and they could undo what you guys decide right now. So,
absolutely.
Other than that, not a lot going on, it sounds like, because maybe we're waiting for the change as well.
Right. So we're still doing some basic city business. There's some bids, I think, on the next agenda for items that were scheduled for replacement. I think we have a couple of planning commission things that came to city council, like a zoning change, things like that. But it's pretty basic business right now. This traditionally in this time, while we're going over an election every 2 years, everything kind of slows down, because we are going to have a new council, and especially when you're potentially turning over so many seats in the council. Just going back to exactly what you said on the roads decision, any policy level decisions that we've made by this council could be subject to change, frankly, in January or February if the new electeds didn't agree with it.
Well, I think that's a smart decision. Don't put something in place that can be undone in just a couple of months. Now, obviously, that, you know, if the new council decides something in January, February, that could be undone, but it would be a couple years down the road.
Yeah.
You would hope that people would understand this was why we made this decision at this point in time, and that they would keep that in line. But it's going to be interesting. As far as the road conversation, did you hear in favor of one way or another the types of streets people might like on some of these unpaved stretches of city roads?
So we had a few people that commented that they were okay with the dirt roads, and I think a lot of that, my personal opinion, has a lot to do with cost, that they're okay with the dirt roads if it's going to cost them a substantial amount of money to improve those. But I think we heard a substantially more people that are talking about wanting some type of improvements, whether that's ribbon paving with some improved drainage or full street construction. I think that kind of varies by where you are in the neighborhood.
Okay.
We have a survey open right now on the City of Laramie website for everybody. It's open to the entire community, and it's pretty short. It's less than 10 questions, asking people these exact questions. You know, do you live on an unpaved road? Yes or no? Would you do you have a preference as to what type of road? If the city council was to make improvements, would you feel like comfortable contributing financially? All of those things. And so we're leaving that survey open for a few more weeks, and then the city will pull that and collate that data, and that'll be part of the policy level discussion that comes back to council.
Now, will that be presented in December, or are we talking to the new council once the first of the year is passed?
I think, you know, I'm not entirely sure on the timing, but if we do it in December, we'll certainly have all the newly electeds, anybody that's coming on the council, invited. In fact, whoever looks to be winners tomorrow night, they will get invitations to come to all the remaining council meetings the rest of the year, so they can kind of get up to speed on what's going on.
Anything else that we need to be aware of? As you mentioned, things have kind of slowed down.
Yeah,
but anything else that you got going on? We were talking about some code things, but maybe simplifying that last time for businesses in the community?
Yep, so that actually looks like it's good. We're going to pass that.
Okay.
And that's kind of a few simplifications on the fire code and the building code. Most of those were not, we didn't have any objections come from the public at all. Hopefully that'll make things a little bit more streamlined.
Well, I was going to say, when you simplify things, I think people are okay with it. It's when you add more complicated language that
it gets a little,
it gets a little dicey, I'd say.
One of the other things that I guess I should mention, just so people have it kind of in their mind, we have had a lot of comments in the last 18 months about when the city goes out and makes changes to no parking zones, especially around corners. So when we redo traffic intersections, so think Garfield Street behind Laramie GM up by the rec center, we did that almost 2 years ago.
Okay.
We had some significant traffic changes when we took the lights down at 4th and Clark. And so the city went in and did some yellow striping there, and it's taking away parking, and so things are changing. We're going to have a work session here late November, early December,
Okay.
On that topic as a whole. So we're getting a lot of feedback. Sometimes when the city engineer's office goes in and makes these changes to no parking zones, usually it's enlarging the no parking zones around businesses and homes. And so we haven't had that conversation as a community. Talk about a little bit about why we do it and what the council really wants to set as the standard. If we want to follow the engineering standard to the letter, if there's other things that need to be taken in consideration, so that as these changes come up, we have a better policy for that.
Well, and I can understand the conversation, because let me just put it this way: as somebody who drives in the community, and as I approach some of those intersections, I would rather have, I hate to say it, more no parking for a safety standpoint as a vehicle operator, rather than sometimes you come upon some corners in this community and you can't see around vehicles. I know there are some other objections. People can't see around vegetation and things like that. That's a different part of the conversation. But I can understand where people get upset that you're taking away parking, but at the same time, I can also see it from a safety standpoint. If I'm operating a vehicle, I can't see around this vehicle or things of that nature. I think people tend to forget that sometimes.
Well, and I think that's part of why we want to have the conversation about why traditionally we do these things. It's very important. You know, that one of the top priorities of the city is to make sure that the streets are safe for pedestrians and vehicles. We don't want to see accidents. We don't want to see anybody getting hurt. But you do have to pair that with the conversation about, you know, if we make some changes around a business owner's on their street and they don't have any off-street parking, and we just took the parking away in front of their business, right? We need to have that conversation. So there's some logistical things that come, and that usually, you don't see that in the newer developments in town because we deal with that a little bit better with some parking requirements and things, but in the older areas of town, think downtown, 4th, 5th, 6th, kind of the tree area where there's businesses and stuff, that becomes more of an issue because they don't necessarily have off-street parking.
Anything else from a city council standpoint right now here?
No, I think that's, I mean, it's pretty slow right now.